Welcome to Armchair Expat, the podcast meant to get you out of your lazy boy and into your new life abroad. I'm Shannon Acton, founder of Bargain Homes Abroad, and I'm riding shotgun as we chase the dream of life beyond borders. Each episode, we'll hear stories from people who've left their comfort zone to explore the world. They'll share their highs, their lows, and their in-betweens, all meant to lovingly light a fire under your bum, so you can stop dreaming about it and start living it. So if you're stuck in your comfy recliner, scrolling through dreamy destinations, wondering what if, it's time to swap that raggedy old armchair for a one-way ticket. Let's freaking go, people. Today's guest is someone who brings deep wisdom, lived experience, and heartfelt insight to the dream and reality of moving abroad. Dr. Colleen Crowley is a psychologist, expat, and global traveler with more than 20 years of experience helping individuals navigate life's big transitions. She's lived all over the world, raised her kids abroad, and now uses that personal and professional experience to support others in making their own international leap. Whether you're stuck on where to move, overwhelmed by logistics, or just grappling with the emotional roller coaster that often comes with change, Dr. Crowley has likely been there and has tools to guide you through it. In this conversation, we talk about identity, parenting, fear, moving with family and pets, and why it's normal to feel scared before doing something so life-changing. Please welcome to the podcast, Dr. Colleen Crowley. Hello, Dr. Crowley. Colleen, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I'm thrilled to be here.
So let's just dive right in. Can you give a little bit of your background and where you're from, kind of your, how you moved abroad?
Of course. So let's see. I'm currently an expat living abroad and traveling almost full time. Additionally, I've been traveling and been an expat in many countries for the last 30 years, 3 decades. And I'm a mom to 3. I'm also, I was a psychologist for over 20 years, pretty recently retired, and then somewhat fortuitously and serendipitously sort of found myself in this position of sort of marrying my experience as an expat and someone who's lived abroad and is living abroad with being a psychologist for all those years and helping other people now chase their dreams of living abroad. So it was sort of a happy accident that came to be, but here I am.
Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about, you were living in California with your family and your dog, and you made a decision to move.
Right.
Can you walk us through kind of what that looked like and what went into that decision, especially with kids? I think I get a lot of questions about family and kids and dogs or pets in general.
Mom, my elderly
and your mom,
our dog,
yeah.
And kids, of course. I mean, so because I had lived abroad and traveled for 30 years, as did my husband, living abroad and raising the kids overseas was always part of the plan. It can be really tricky when you have 3 kids and 2 careers to figure out, oh my gosh, okay, so when's the right time? This one might want to finish elementary school with their friends, or it might not be a great time career-wise to go. But it was always something that was part of our bigger plan. It was 2022, and sort of this confluence of events came together, where it was just looking like it was a great time for everyone, just where everybody sort of was lining up in school or not school, where we were in our careers, and we were sort of looking around at each other saying, like, I think now might be the time. And so once we sort of realized that, everyone was excited and on board, and it happened pretty quickly. I mean, I think we decided in March, and by the end of June, we were gone. So it was quick. Yeah, and that's, you have to sort of be full of intention at that point. So that's how that happens.
That's a very quick turnaround. Like, what were the logistics involved that where did you decide to go as a home base?
Right. So many logistics. Deciding where to go. I always see moving abroad kind of in three huge chunks, which is first of all, deciding where you want to go. And then the second part is sort of preparing to leave. And then, the third part is establishing yourself once you're there. For us, the only major criteria we had at that time was we wanted Spanish speaking for the kids to learn that as a second language. I had spent a lot of time in Chile and loved the country and was sort of thinking like, I think that might be our spot. We knew, however, that we were going to be largely nomadic, that even though we were sort of going to move abroad, we were going to be traveling full time also. And so we love Southeast Asia, and we thought, even though it's still quite far, Spain might be a better central location for being able to travel to all the places we wanted to go. So Spain it was. And in terms of the logistics, oh boy, right? It's, I always tell people, you sort of have to divide it into the tangible and the intangible. So the tangible are, all the things you can sort of form as action items and take care of. I mean, visas, right? And health insurance and packing up a home and selling a home, finding a new home on the other side of the world, choosing schools, those sort of things. But then there's also, especially with three kiddos, all the intangible stuff, which is the emotions around it, the psychology of it, the saying goodbyes, the those processes that I think as a mom are the ones that weigh on you the most. And so you little by little start checking things off the list. And in our case, and this is probably a separate podcast, honestly, which is aging parents and pets, which end up coming up so much in all the people I work with who are relocating. Maybe you don't want to leave your family. Maybe you have an aging parent. What are the options for bringing relatives? In our case, my mom was a huge part of our life. She was excited about our move, but she wasn't sure what she wanted to do. Ultimately, she decided to come with. So in an even shorter time frame, we worked through the process of getting her a visa and securing her housing. And like I said, that's probably an entirely different podcast, but a really rich one is figuring out, how do you get family abroad? And then pets is also another big one. We have a Labrador and he's family, and he needed to get 20 hours across the ocean in a crate of, the likes of which he had never seen a crate in his life. So that was a process. But so yeah, just little by little, every day, sort of checking off the tangible stuff and the intangible stuff to
And
execute.
how old were your kids at the time of the move?
At the time they were 16, 14, and 8.
Okay,
So
so you
two
had
two
kind of
girls,
elementary
14.
school, junior high, and high
Mhm.
school.
Yes.
How has their
Yep.
transition been? And well, first of all, how did you get them on board? Were they on board from the start, or did you have a little
I
resistance?
mean, they couldn't have been more excited.
Mm.
Which is somewhat surprising, right? I had two adolescent girls. I mean, peers are sort of everything at that age. And so you're not so sure. And obviously, we had talked about it for years and it being an idea. And once we were looking at sort of all the data points, like, hey guys, this could work for everyone right now. I mean, the enthusiasm was through the roof, which I'm so grateful for because that's not always the case for people. And, in terms of their transition, I mean, I think one really amazing way to sort of sum it up is just a couple months ago, we were having dinner and talking about the transition, and every single one of them said that we wished we had done it sooner. So it's been a complete paradigm shift for them, honestly. And that is not to say it's been easy. I mean, they came to a country, they left everything they knew. They didn't speak the language. They didn't have a single friend. And so it's not, I always tell people it's not easy, but it's been so amazing to see how much they've loved the adventure.
Mm-hmm. And you said that you have a kind of a home base in Spain, but you're spending a lot of time traveling. So do your kids do like online schooling programs, or how did that work into the kind of
Yep.
logistics of your move?
Yeah. So this is a topic I love talking about with
Hmm.
people contemplating moving abroad, and then also once they move abroad. Um, for lots of reasons. Yes, we homeschool. Our oldest is at university. So she left last year to go to university in Europe. And then our other two are here and they're homeschooling, and we're digital nomads. We're moving. So they're schooling, and we kind of have a routine worked out where we travel, and we have jobs and careers, and so we work, and they're very autonomous and very sort of self-governed. I'm not teaching them math. We've got that figured out sort of with a curriculum. There's so many amazing resources. So we've got a fair bit of structure many of the days. Even if last week we were hiking the Dolomites and we used the first 2 or 3 hours of the day for us all to sort of catch up on work, and then we get out and about. And at the same time, we can decide if next week there's great surf or snow somewhere, let's go on an adventure. And so that model is not for everyone. But I also think one of the most sort of meaningful topics to talk about with families, and one where I see them getting most stuck when it comes to moving abroad, is a lot of fear and apprehension about school. We as a family have done it all. We have homeschooled, unschooled, world schooled, online school, private, public, you name it. And I think, education, there's a lot of evolving of regular brick and mortars right now. And there's so many options for educating kids, and every country has a really unique culture around it. And so it's just something that I love talking about and exploring what families might be open to, because lots of different doors open based on that.
Hmm. So, how did your background as a psychologist kind of shape your approach to the move? This last move in general.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, being someone that's lived abroad off and on for 3 decades and has traveled the world, um, I didn't have a lot of fear about showing up in an unfamiliar culture. That was super exciting to me and familiar to me. And so I think that allowed me to be quite grounded in the process. It can certainly be much harder if you haven't traveled extensively or lived abroad. So I think that was a good foundation. And then in terms of my psychology background, I think it's been significant. I think I certainly take a holistic view of things. So trying to consider the entire family unit and all of the factors that go into a well lived life, and issues that arise. Probably not surprisingly, we communicate a lot. So there's a lot of talking about how we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what are your apprehensions, what are you excited about, what did you notice, and I always make sure to tell parents that you can also include your own apprehensions. I think it's really wonderful to be able to say, like, I do not know how this is going to turn out. I don't know if this is going to be a good fit for us. I'm not sure how this is going to unfold. So a ton of communicating. And the other thing I really tell parents, and this goes for whether you're moving abroad or anything, is to involve your children in all the decision making and all the layers that go into that. We really gave them a huge sense of agency, and they were involved in everything from what country we were thinking about to, come on, you guys, let's look at these couple of houses, to take a look and read about these schools. What do you think of this town? How are you thinking you're going to learn a language? So those are two huge ones, which is communicate about all of it, and really involve your kids in the process.
Mm. And so you were very fortunate to have your all three children on board, and
Yes.
that sense of agency that you gave them, there wasn't really any resistance there. Do you have any tips for parents that might have one or more children that are really unsure, and some tips to help the parents?
Biggest things that can come up, right, is when parents are ready to go and children are reluctant. And to be clear, I always want to highlight that some reluctance is natural. It's a massive undertaking and upheaval of someone's life. Again, trying to communicate and really allowing a child to express what they are feeling without judgment, without criticism, and listening, and just exploring that with them. There's a time and a place to go into problem solving mode, right? Like if they're saying, I don't, I'm going to lose my friends, or I'm not going to make new friends, to listen and be deeply empathetic, and then at a later time say, hey, I was thinking about solutions to if you feel like it's going to be hard to make friends. Here are some things I know that's going to happen for you there, or what happens in schools or outside activities. Also, if you can get kids to connect with other expat kids, it makes an enormous difference, right? I mean, there are these incredibly rich expat communities. Some places have much larger ones than others, and that's actually a really big consideration when you're considering where to go. We've been in places where there's no English spoken, no expat community, and we've been in places where it's largely international. And our kids felt, um, like they were in a universe with kids just like them who had moved all over. So being able to connect with other kids who are in their shoes, listening. There's this exercise that I have a lot of people do who want to move, but have a lot of fear and apprehension about it, which is to actually catastrophize. This is a psych tool that we use sort of when we have sort of irrational thoughts or fears, is to sort of catastrophize about what is the worst case scenario. And normally it's infinitely less scary than we anticipate. And also then helping kids understand what are the huge doors that could open as a result of it. So those are some tools that are certainly helpful with families as they're navigating such a massive change.
Yeah. And so when you do that exercise of kind of catastrophizing it, what would that look like? Like just kind of journaling out like the worst case, these are the worst fears that I have.
Yeah.
And then once you get that out, what do you do with that? If you're still
Yeah.
mentally like believing that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, most of the time, the scenarios are significantly less scary, right, than you think that they're going to be. But something that's really useful, no matter what you're catastrophizing in life, right, is say the worst case scenario happens. Say you show up and you don't have friends, for example, right? If we're talking about a person who arrives and they don't have friends. Also talking about, and okay, and so what? So then what happens? So you have long days with mom and dad and your siblings. So then we try to get your friends from back home to visit more often. So we'll plan more visits home. So you can do lots of FaceTime calls. So you'll have time to sort of dig deep on what it means to sort of be standing strong and independent without the buffer of the group of friends you've always had. And so by no means is it to sugarcoat it, but one of the most valuable things you can give a child, and this is one of the things that I worked with for over 2 decades with families and children, is you don't want to keep them from adversity. And one of the things we do as parents, and it's in our DNA, is to try to keep them from suffering. And what I really encourage parents is it's the exact opposite. You want to help them face head on the challenges that life's going to throw at them and show them they can overcome it. That's where you develop resilience and grit and self-esteem and a sense of agency. And so it's just invaluable, and really helping parents to realize, I know it's so uncomfortable to sit with your child's apprehension about whatever it is, whether it's moving abroad or you name it. But just sitting with them in that process and helping them move through that, that's where the magic is. And so that's a really valuable part of the process.
Yeah. And I think these are even tools with people without children can do with themselves.
Oh my
Like this
gosh, of
is,
course.
we're not just
Yeah.
talking about kids here. We're talking about talking ourselves through worst case scenarios, equipping ourselves with, tools and and tips to really kind of work
Of
through the worst
course.
case fears and
Yeah.
regulate our nervous system,
Yep.
build
Absolutely.
resilience, all
And
of
a
that.
lot of, what I notice is the biggest roadblocks to people moving abroad has nothing to do with sort of visas or careers or health insurance. It's internal ones. And that's not to minimize that those decisions are not massive. They are figuring out how you're going to make an income or what country you can get into financially visa wise or what's the safest country. These are significant issues. And at the same time, what's been so illuminating about this work is, it's really just sort of a larger metaphor for the things that hold us back, right? And keep us
Yeah.
from sort of living our best life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's the first thing that came to mind is really when I hear pushback from people, well, I don't know if I can get a job or I don't have any skills. That's just speaking for the actual fear that you have internally of making this move. But you're going to use the excuse of I can't get a visa, I don't know if I can get a remote job, I don't have any job skills, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that can be really hard to face.
yeah.
Right. But the truth is I
Oh
mean, there's
yeah, because we'll come up with excuses all day long.
sure. It's
Absolutely.
much easier to live comfortably, right, in an uncomfortable but familiar reality. Making a small change can be really difficult for people. I mean, moving across the world, I mean, is in many ways as radical as it gets. So it's really an exciting opportunity to sort of face those parts of yourself.
Mhm. Speaking of fear, and this is kind of going a little bit off topic, but it popped up in my head, and I think it's something that's kind of timely. A
Hmm.
lot of people, especially in the United States, are feeling a lot of fear right now. And
Sure.
the push to move abroad is very forefront right now in what I'm seeing. How does someone
Mhm.
determine if this is actually a true desire of theirs to, live a different life abroad versus reacting to the fear, whether it's political, financial, whatever? How do you determine the difference, and then what do you do with that information?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's a timely issue, and there's lots of people who've never maybe even thought about moving abroad, and now, the impetus with current politics, they want to. I caution people to use that as sort of your only sort of motivation to move abroad. My experience is that it's not enough, right, to have you sort of um, be fully ensconced and committed in your new life abroad. And the only way to sort of get through that is to do some soul searching around it and some introspection, right? Okay, I don't want to be here. I want to be somewhere else. You know that, but then can you sort of really sink yourself into what would life look like over there, and how would it feel to be away from things, and can I be a foreigner, and where can I go, and all of those layers of things. It requires definitely doing some introspection and some soul searching on that, and it's something, as you can imagine, I'm doing a lot of right now with people who are
For sure.
thinking they want to do it. Okay, great. And also, let's look at all that that would require. In one case, I will tell you, last month, someone was intent on it happening, and it was a couple, and they ultimately made the decision that they think they would be better served by getting really involved in like a counter movement, right, in the US. And they felt like being away from it would be too much of a feeling of them not doing what they needed to do or their responsibility for things. But that was after a handful of sessions and talking about what was, coming up for them. So it's very case dependent and personal.
How does relocating to a new country kind of impact someone's sense of identity?
Um, well, I think it can be on a spectrum, right? So it can be in little ways and in you know significant ways. I think depending in many ways on how willing you are to let it, right? I mean, one of the things I really encourage people who are moving abroad is to be open to a new identity. I think, and and what I mean by that is, I think we really underestimate how living in one sort of narrow little part of the world, with all the trappings that that's composed of, what our parents said we should be, what our culture says we should be, what we need to achieve, our material possessions, and even if you had a lovely experience, a lovely community, or great parenting, you still have an extremely limited idea of who you are and what's out there in the world. And so you don't just want to sort of pick up and move your life, from California to Indonesia and be the exact same person with the same ego around your job and your group of friends and your clothes, right? So, yes, there is some identity loss. And yes, that's an incredible opportunity to explore parts of yourself or create just a more diverse version of yourself.
Are there any ways that people can go into this and prepare themselves emotionally? Like, I know I'm going to have a different identity. I want a new identity. I want this to shape me. Like, but how do you prepare for that emotionally?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way you can prepare for it, and this is one of the issues that comes up the most with the people I support, is you have to be open minded and open hearted to what lies ahead. So many people want to micromanage what the reality is going to look like. And one of the most exciting things about this opportunity um, is tolerating the unknown, which I've said therapeutically for decades now, right? It doesn't matter what it is. And nothing more sort of brings that to the forefront than moving abroad. And so I think the only way you can prepare yourself is to really pay attention to the fears you're projecting, to trying to be open-minded, to knowing you can pivot if you need to keeping a fierce sense of humor through it all. And I don't mean that in like a superficial way. I just mean that it's not that serious. It's significant, but everything can be sort of managed, and you can pivot if necessary, and you ultimately develop the resources through this kind of life change to get through all of that.
I think, and such a great point is, I mean, whether you move abroad or not, this whole world is unknown, right?
Every minute of it.
There is no control over what your future is, whether you stay put where you are right now or in the future. So if you have this desire and you want to move abroad, that, again, go back to the worst case scenario, kind of walk
Right.
through that, right?
Yeah. And also, I mean, I always say there's like the monsters you know and the monsters you don't know, right? So I mean, you can stay where you are, and if there's lots of discontent and you've wanted for a long time to make a massive change, you can stay in that reality, or you can go towards sort of the monsters you don't know, right? And I have yet to see anyone move abroad and not have a sense of um, complete transformation in some aspect of their life, despite it being really challenging.
Hmm. That can be a scary thing, though.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Some people want transformation. Some people are scared of transformation. But
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely. I mean, it's much easier to stay in a place that's familiar, even if there's discomfort.
yeah, absolutely. So can we transition a little bit into kind of making the move?
Mm,
And a lot of expats or a lot of people, when they do make that move, kind of have this sense of disconnection and possibly loneliness
mhm.
at first. And so, do you have any tips to walk through to face that loneliness and disconnection and what they can do to help themselves transition?
Absolutely. I think interestingly, it's exploring both ends of that sort of disconnection and loneliness spectrum. So one end of the spectrum is there's tremendous value in feeling lonely, and really sort of exploring where that's coming from and what's triggering that, and what are the underpinnings of that. And in a lot of ways, going even deeper into that. Um, there's real sort of resilience that comes from understanding where your triggers are in that and why that's a scary place. Most often, when someone does that, there are tools and insight into yourself that actually keep you from and assuaging some of the loneliness you feel. Um, and that can be really intuitive, right? I mean, going deeper into sort of your sense of isolation or loneliness can feel sort of counter. And also, there's some profound work that can be done individually by doing that. And then the other end of the spectrum is, jumping in with 2 feet to connecting to your community, and developing a real network. And it's not overnight. And in some cases it is. I mean, there are some expat communities on this globe that are the most inclusive, the most welcoming. I've had people say, like, I've never, ever had so many friends in my life. What you find with expats is, in many ways, they're cut from the same cloth, right? And they've done the same thing you have. What I really notice is, like, there's no small talk. A lot of times it goes right to, like, how the hell did you get here, right? So what's your scenario? How did this happen? And I mean, the wealth of ways you can meet expats, whether it's on social media platforms or now just exclusively for expats, is amazing. And so I always say to, like, cast a wide net. I watched my kids do it in sort of an amazing way. I mean, we just said, like, cast a wide net. I mean, get to know, try as many things as you possibly can. So I think it's both of those, not running from the loneliness, and then also simultaneously being proactive about the community you want to create.
Mm, very sage advice. What,
Mm.
besides the loneliness, what are kind of the common stages that people go through once they have transitioned abroad?
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen, like, a prototype followed. And again, it can be, it's so case dependent on the person. If you're individual, if you're a couple, if you're a family, where you end up. Like I said, like, there are these places that are don't sort of make it really easy to transition, and then there's other ones where it's much easier to transition. I think, let's see, I'm trying to think of some things that come to mind. One thing I see come up with families a lot is a lot of worry about kids not transitioning quickly. And so that's something that I work with a lot on, saying, like, it's part of the process. It's okay for them to come home and feel like they don't have a tribe yet. They're an outsider. There's such rich value in that experience. And so I think another thing I'll notice is sometimes doubting the location they picked. Like, this is amazing, but I wonder if this other place would have had better schools, a sunnier climate, been better for my career. So some second guessing, I think.
Hmm. I would imagine there's kind of a honeymoon phase too, where you're the novelty of being somewhere new and all this excitement, and then
Yeah.
that kind of wears off. What would you recommend once that kind of phase
That
hits?
wears off when you have to sort of, like, deal with the bureaucracy of visas in the new country you're in. I mean, I have not heard of a country where it's easier to sort of navigate bureaucratic matters. Um, Again, having a lot of flexibility and nimbleness. I mean, that those are two of the tools that I cannot suggest enough to people who want to move abroad, which is, um, I mean, things that take you one visit in the United States will take you four moving abroad, right? If you're going to get a driver's license, or trying to get a visa matter reconciled, or a school sign up, or a padrone to get your child in, it's a lot of work. And so I think, being nimble and flexible, and kind of getting away from that sort of American grind, which sort of doesn't exist in a lot of other places, which is, like, it will happen, it will get accomplished, it might take some extra visits. and just appreciating that there's, it's life, and there's some ebbing and flowing to sort of any transition.
Yeah, that kind of came into my head. It's like you need to learn to go with the flow. And it's the ultimate exercise in patience,
It
in
is.
learning patience, because we are not
Absolutely.
patient. I am not a patient person. And
Yeah,
you definitely,
right.
when you, even if you travel, you learn that, wow, okay, I'm really type A. I need to chill out because this is not healthy, number one. And most of the world is not like this.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, especially, I mean, the majority of people I work with are American, and I would say every single country except for maybe the UAE, every other country bureaucratically is much slower. And that can be really frustrating. I mean, you don't get a return email for weeks. You want to meet up with a realtor to see a house? Well, guess what? They're not even working for the entire month of August, right? So in Indonesia, I mean, a lot of people only do phone calls, and you'll only get a hold of them if they pick up. There's not emailing. So there definitely has to be some patience around that. Talking to other expats in your community is an invaluable resource for that, because most of them will say, "Yep, totally normal. Just give it a second." But that's a big one to get adjusted to.
Do you have any tips for, moving abroad can be one, stressful, it can cause a little bit or a lot of anxiety. Do you have some tips for people who want to kind of regulate that nervous system and get themselves a little more centered and grounded?
Well, that's a whole entire podcast
Oh,
itself.
good. Then you're coming back to visit us.
Okay. Well, I mean, the most important thing to know is that regulating your nervous system is the number one thing you should be doing. So do that. And again, that's a whole exercise of getting yourself grounded. I mean, if we just want to go through real sort of top tier sort of basic steps for that is, undertaking any massive move. And then what comes from that can bring up a lot of anxiety. Getting yourself in your body as much as you possibly can, feet on the ground, feeling your breath, regulating your nervous system is first and foremost. I think what people want to do, especially with massive undertakings like this, is get really in their head and problem solve. And what's really interesting is it should happen in the reverse order. So get grounded, regulate your nervous system, and then gently and methodically start attacking the issues that are coming up for you, sort of intellectually, and but from a present place.
Hmm. I would imagine moving abroad kind of brings up old wounds and patterns a lot too, since,
Of
yeah,
course. Yeah. I mean, it's really, if you have any issues, moving abroad is just going to,
we all have issues.
yeah. So it's gonna be a magnifying glass, right? Or a
Mm.
catalyst in many ways, for those issues to come up. And that's why it's such a really good time. That's why I had retired as a psychologist, right? And then this sort of accidentally sort of found me. It's been a really sort of amazing way to sort of watch people process things, um, in a unique way, in a unique setting. The other thing I will say though is that it's also been completely amazing to see how many complexes are extinguished when you move to a new location, right? I
Say
mean,
more
and that,
about that.
well, it goes back to the idea I was discussing where we underestimate how the trappings of modern day life and our parenting, our community, our small town, our expectations, what we've been told by our culture, influence us, right? And if you find yourself in a radically different reality, um, you realize, like, oh, wow, I get to set those down here, right? I mean, those just don't exist as much. I mean, working with a family who just settled in Portugal, there's such a beautiful life, family, work balance there, that we have a really hard time as Americans identifying with. And so, and they dealt with, both parents are entrepreneurs, and they dealt with a tremendous amount of anxiety and always needing to produce and be productive, and sort of ensconcing themselves in a culture where it's frowned upon has been profoundly limiting. So while it can absolutely be a magnifying glass and a catalyst for some of, our wounds, it can also be an opportunity to be like, wow, I get to set that down, and I'm not as affected by it here.
And it's basically effectively changing our brains, right? Like
Completely.
we're rewiring our brains to a
Yeah.
whole new world.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, one of my favorite parenting quotes, and it's so true for moving abroad too, right? Is if the flower's not growing, you don't sort of look at the flower, right? You look at the environment, right? So the soil and the sunshine and the rain, and in so many cases, and that's not to say there are certainly, you know, times where it's critical to sort of look at sort of the growth of the flower and the specifics of that. But also, environment plays a huge role. Um, and look, every culture has its pros and cons, right? I mean, I could never sit here and say, I mean, this is the best country, or this country is so much better. But the truth is, that, the United States has unique sort of pathologies, and sort of uh, unique effects on all sorts of people. And there's such a thing as like a goodness of fit, right? Where a particular culture just feels much better for you. And so those are really exciting things to see, when people find themselves in a new land, in a new reality.
Hmm. How important is coaching or therapy when someone is approaching a move like this? Or is it important to seek it out ahead of time or afterwards or both? Like, what would you recommend?
I think knowing yourself a little bit. I mean, I've found people really need it at various stages.
Okay.
Working with a family now, the husband was all gung ho, and the wife had a lot of apprehensions. And then they got here, and it switched. And one's having a much harder time adjusting, and the other one couldn't be happier. So I think it depends on what's going on for you. I've helped people at sort of every end of the spectrum, really sort of unpacking their fears and their apprehensions about and moving, and what needs to happen, and what's going on for the kids, and how it's going to impact the marriage and their jobs, before they move, and then also, after they move, and the struggles with getting kids established, or finding your sense of community, or missing family, or so I think it depends, and it's sort of paying attention to um, where you're feeling like you're at around it.
Okay. So let's go into your work. You mentioned very early on in the podcast that you were retired. And
Yes.
it seems like you've come out of retirement because this work has found you. What is the work that you're doing right now? Who do you help? And let's just walk through that.
Sure. So I did retire from my, traditional and psychology practice that I had done for over 20 years. It was incredible work. I had survived COVID, like all of us did, being a psychologist. Um, and it just felt like it was a time for me, like many women in midlife, saying like, okay, um, I think I'm going to pivot. I wasn't completely sure what that looked like. The move then came up shortly after that. And so was just really focused on getting everybody moved and established. And then what happened was, um, I kept getting, this funny thing happens when you tell people you're moving abroad, is I swear every single person says they also have a dream to move abroad. I think it's sort of in our DNA to sort of have adventures or explore. And so it's really fun to sort of hear, people's fantasies about what they want to do. I started to get contacted by friends of friends, by family members who had told someone, and them saying like, hey, how did you do this? Can I ask you some questions? And so I noticed that a lot of the same questions started to come up for people, and were very familiar. And so I just started to take notes. And it was funny because in a matter of a few short months, this sort of workbook had sort of taken form. Because what I really realized was the first big decision people have to make is where they're going to move. And while there's a ton of expat resources out there, what I found was first, there's not a ton for family. There's a lot of like retirement resources, there's a lot of digital nomad stuff. There's some kind of high level stuff around family issues, but there's unique issues to families. And then the other thing I realized was um, there's a lot of like, these are the top 10 countries for expats, right? And what I realized was it's very much like dating. It's like someone can look great on paper. Someone can say like, oh, all these things add up and it looks like, you know, Ireland might be a great fit for me, right? Or Spain might be a great fit for me. But once you sort of get into the weeds and do some introspection, which is a critical part of the workbook that I wrote, and looking at all the data points you need to look at, is sort of getting clear on why am I doing this? What am I looking for? What am I hoping for? And then sort of what location on the planet possibly best meets that. And so that was the evolution, was retired, but wait a second, all these people are wanting some support. And so just marrying my therapeutic background with having lived abroad off and on for so many decades and now recently doing it.
Yeah. And we will, just so everyone knows, the link to the workbook will be in the show notes so that they can,
Okay,
if they're
yeah.
interested, they
Yeah,
can
it's
do
just
that.
it's a starting point, it's
Yeah.
kind of a catalyst to get you thinking about things.
And do you work with one-on-one clients or have any kind of programs as well?
Mhm. So largely one-on-one, and then doing some groups for groups of people who've sort of found themselves with similar issues or maybe going to sort of the same location. So I'm not the person who like helps you get your visa. There's incredible people who are sort of country specific for that. Um, I'm much more looking at sort of what are the issues that are holding you back? What are your apprehensions about going forward? What are your struggles once you get settled? And then another part of it that I find is a lot of fun is helping people sort of find what location might work best for them. There's not enough information out there, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who sort of fantasize about living in France, right? And then they take a closer look and like, it was like taxes there not going to work for me, or wait a second, homeschool's frowned, it's not actually legal in France, or there's just a much closer look you have to take at figuring out sort of what issues would make for the best scenario and country for you.
Hmm. Are there any last things? I mean, I am going to right now put you on the spot and invite you back because there are a lot of topics that we can really dive
So
deep
many.
into.
Yes.
But
I
is there
love.
anything else you want to leave us with today, as far as, the audience is really someone who's thinking about moving abroad, but really has that fear or hasn't quite, um, made that decision, or there's decisions made, but their really fear is holding them back. Do you have any
Right.
words of wisdom for them?
So many. Um, I mean, hugely, I just want to say, do it. And I don't say that easily. I think, and that's one of the reasons I love the work you do so much, is I am so passionate about people moving abroad. Moving abroad is really different than traveling. And I think that moving abroad, it doesn't have to be permanent, right? It can be for a discrete period of time, maybe. Perhaps you never return, who knows? But there are a few things that so alter you as a human. And I also think moving abroad and walking in someone else's shoes is arguably sort of one of the quickest way to sort of rid our world of most of the things that ail us, right? And that for me is where my deepest passion lies for this work. It's really hard to be closed-minded or xenophobic or super judgmental when you expose yourself to more and more, and land in a country where you're an outsider. And so I can't sort of emphatically state enough that I suggest doing it with little kids, doing it with your parents if you must, your aging parents, and do it scared, right? It would be weird if you didn't have apprehensions about this, right? I mean, of course you do, and those are just sort of parts of you, wise parts of you, sort of suggesting that you look at things or unpack things or explore things, and take baby steps. It can feel monumental trying to tackle this. And so taking baby steps to sort of achieve it. And, the last thing I would say is definitely relying on a community or a resource to get you through, whether it's an expat therapist, whether it's someone who's done it before, or, I'm sure many of your guests that you're going to have on the podcast will be an invaluable resource for people also.
That's beautiful. I love your mission, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's like I'm on a mission to normalize moving abroad.
Yes.
Coming from someone who has never actually moved abroad, I do mostly traveling, but my goal is to get abroad specifically for this reason. There's a whole wide world out there. It shifts our perspective. We grow as human beings. We become more open and loving. It's like most of the world already it's in their culture to move and do and shift and do things, especially in Europe. It's like they move and shift and do things, and it's normal. Versus the Americans, we're so isolated. We're so in our own little bubble. And if we could just get out and see more, like you said, even if it's for 6 months, it's a year, it doesn't have to be forever, but it will change your life.
Completely.
For the better.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's so true.
Where can everyone find you if they want to get in touch with you?
So International Family Life is our website, and I'm available on the website to support anyone who's in any stage of this process. And I look forward to our other conversations on all the other layered topics that affect expats. And I'm just so grateful for the work you're doing, because like I said, I love anyone who's inspiring others to make this leap.
Thank you. Oh, that's so sweet. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I have a lot to take away and go talk to my husband about now to kind of impetus to push our plan forward by a few years. But thank you for joining us.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's no perfect time, but the sooner the better. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Thank you, Colleen. And we will hopefully see you soon.
Absolutely.
And that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening and spending some time with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to follow the show and leave a review. It will really help others find us. And if you're dreaming about a life abroad or already living it, I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Instagram at bargainhomesabroad or on our website, www.bargainhomesabroad.co. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and I'll see you back in the armchair soon. Bye-bye.